Uncle cheated me out of inheritance, claiming Grandpa changed his will. Found the real will hidden in old books. Now he's begging me to keep it quiet and share. For context, I'm a 28-year-old guy, and my grandfather passed away about 6 months ago. He was an amazing man, kind, generous, and sharp as a tack right up until the end. We were really close, and I spent a lot of time with him in his final years, especially after my grandmother died. My uncle, let's call him Frank, is my dad's older brother. He's always been the black sheep of the family, constantly in and out of jobs, borrowing money, and causing drama. My dad passed away when I was young, so Frank was my only real connection to that side of the family. When Grandpa died, we were all devastated. The funeral was beautiful, and it seemed like the whole town came out to pay their respects. Grandpa had been a pillar of the community, running a successful local bookstore for decades before retiring. About a week after the funeral, we all gathered at Grandpa's house for the reading of the will. I wasn't expecting much, maybe some sentimental items or a small amount of money. But to my shock, Uncle Frank produced a will that left almost everything to him. The house, the savings, even the bookstore, which had been in the family for generations. The will claimed that Grandpa had changed his mind at the last minute, deciding that Frank needed the inheritance more than anyone else. I was stunned. It didn't sound like Grandpa at all. He had always stressed the importance of hard work and personal responsibility. Leaving everything to Frank, who had never shown any interest in the bookstore or family history, just didn't make sense. But what could I do? The will seemed legitimate, and Frank had all the paperwork in order. The lawyer confirmed its validity, and that was that. I tried to talk to Frank about it, but he just shrugged and said, "Guess Dad had a change of heart. Sorry, kid." For the next few months, I was in a daze. I felt betrayed, not just by Frank, but by Grandpa too. Had I misunderstood our relationship? Was I not as important to him as I thought? I threw myself into work, trying to distract myself from the pain and confusion. Then, about 2 weeks ago, everything changed. Frank had been talking about selling the bookstore. He claimed it wasn't profitable anymore and that he needed the cash. I couldn't bear the thought of losing that last connection to Grandpa, so I asked if I could go through the store one last time, to say goodbye and maybe pick out a few books as mementos. Frank agreed, probably thinking it would make me feel better and stop pestering him about the inheritance. Little did he know. I spent a whole Saturday at the bookstore, running my hands over the shelves, remembering all the times I'd spent there with Grandpa. As I was looking through some of the oldest books, beautiful leather-bound editions that Grandpa never wanted to sell, I noticed something odd. One of the books felt off. It was heavier than it should have been, and the pages didn't quite lay flat. Curious, I opened it carefully, and my heart nearly stopped. Hidden inside the hollowed-out book was a sealed envelope. On the front, in Grandpa's unmistakable handwriting, were the words "My true final will and testament." With shaking hands, I opened the envelope. Inside was a notarized will, dated just a month before Grandpa died. And it told a very different story from the one Frank had presented. In this will, Grandpa left the bookstore to me, along with a significant portion of his savings. He explicitly stated that he wanted the store to stay in the family and knew I would honor its legacy. Frank was to receive a modest inheritance, but nothing close to what he'd claimed. There was also a letter addressed to me. In it, Grandpa explained that he'd grown suspicious of Frank in his final months. He'd caught Frank snooping through his papers and had overheard him on the phone, talking about getting his hands on the inheritance. Grandpa didn't confront him directly but decided to take precautions. He wrote this new will in secret and hid it in the one place he knew Frank would never look, inside a book. Grandpa knew how much I loved the store and trusted that I would find it eventually. I sat there on the dusty bookstore floor, tears streaming down my face. All the hurt and confusion of the past months washed away, replaced by a bittersweet mixture of love for my grandfather and anger at Frank's deception. But now I had a dilemma. What should I do with this information? Legally, I knew I was on solid ground. This new will was properly notarized and more recent than the one Frank had presented. But I also knew that if I came forward, it would tear the family apart. There would be legal battles, mudslinging, and who knows what else. I decided to confront Frank first, to give him a chance to come clean. I invited him over to my apartment, sat him down, and without preamble, placed the will on the table between us. The color drained from his face. For a long moment, he just stared at it, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then he looked up at me, and I saw something I'd never seen in my uncle's eyes before: fear. Where did you find that?" he stammered. I told him everything, finding the book, reading Grandpa's letter, the whole story. As I spoke, Frank seemed to shrink into himself. By the time I finished, he looked like a deflated balloon. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I never meant for it to go this far." Over the next hour, Frank confessed everything. He'd been in serious debt, gambling, failed business ventures, you name it. When he found out about Grandpa's fortune, he saw it as his last chance to turn things around. He'd created a fake will, counting on the family's trust and the confusion following Grandpa's death to pull it off. "I kept telling myself I'd make it right," he said, tears in his eyes. "That I'd invest the money, pay everyone back, make the store successful again. But I just dug myself deeper. I sat there, listening to my uncle pour his heart out. Part of me wanted to yell, to call the police, to make him pay for what he'd done. But another part remembered the good times, Frank teaching me to ride a bike, cheering at my high school graduation, being there for me after Dad died." "What do we do now?" Frank asked, his voice small and scared. "And that's where I am now, Reddit. Caught between justice and mercy, family loyalty and personal integrity. On one hand, Frank committed a serious crime. He lied to all of us, stole what rightfully belonged to me and potentially others, and betrayed Grandpa's trust. The law is clearly on my side, and I could take everything back. On the other hand, he's still my uncle. He's the only real connection I have left to my dad. And now that he's come clean, I can see how desperate and ashamed he is. He's begging me to keep this quiet, to find some way we can split the inheritance and avoid a legal nightmare. Part of me thinks that honoring Grandpa's wishes means following the real will to the letter. The bookstore was meant for me, and there was a reason he didn't want Frank to have control over everything. But another part wonders if there's a middle ground. Could we find a way to honor Grandpa's intentions while also giving Frank a chance to make amends? Maybe I could take over the bookstore but work out a repayment plan for the rest of the inheritance? I'm torn, Reddit. What would you do in my situation? Should I insist on following the real will exactly as written? Should I involve lawyers and the rest of the family? Or is there a way to resolve this quietly, giving Frank a chance at redemption while still respecting Grandpa's wishes? I know this is a complex situation, and there's no easy answer. But I could really use some outside perspectives. Has anyone dealt with anything like this before? Any legal experts want to weigh in on the potential consequences? Whatever happens, I know things will never be the same in our family. But maybe, just maybe, there's a way through this that honors Grandpa's memory and gives us all a chance to heal. TLDR, Uncle faked Grandpa's will to steal the inheritance. I found the real will hidden in the family bookstore. Now Uncle is begging for mercy and a chance to make things right. Trying to decide between legal action and a private family resolution. Edit 1. Wow, I didn't expect this post to blow up like it has. Thank you all for your thoughtful responses and advice. I've been reading through everything and trying to process it all. To address some common questions/suggestions. 1. Yes, I've made copies of the real will and stored them in several secure locations. I'm not taking any chances there. 2. Many of you have suggested talking to a lawyer before making any decisions, and I think that's wise. I'm going to look into finding an estate attorney for a consultation this week. 3. For those asking about other family members, it's complicated. My dad was an only child, so Frank is my only uncle. My mom passed away a few years ago. I have some cousins on Frank's side, but we're not very close. The main other relative to consider would be my aunt, Frank's ex-wife, but they've been divorced for years and she wasn't mentioned in either will. 4. Regarding the bookstore, it's not a huge moneymaker, but it's profitable and has a lot of sentimental value. It's also a big part of our small town's culture. I practically grew up there and would love to keep it running. 5. To those suggesting I just take everything and cut Frank out completely, I understand the sentiment, but it's not that simple. Despite everything, he's still family. I'm not excusing what he did, but I want to at least consider options that don't completely destroy any chance of reconciliation. I'm going to take some time to think things over and consult with a lawyer before making any big decisions. I'll update again when there are significant developments. Thank you all again for your support and advice. It means more than you know. Edit 2. Okay, things have developed faster than I expected. I met with a lawyer yesterday, and she confirmed that the new will I found is almost certainly valid and would supersede the fake one Frank presented. After a lot of soul searching and considering your advice, I decided to have another conversation with Frank. I told him that I'd spoken to a lawyer, without giving specifics, and that he needed to come clean to the rest of the family, or I would. To my surprise, Frank broke down completely. He admitted that the guilt has been eating him alive, and he's ready to face the consequences. We spent hours talking, crying, and trying to figure out a way forward. Here's what we've tentatively agreed on, pending approval from the lawyer and the rest of the family. 1. We'll present the real will to everyone and explain the situation. 2. I'll take ownership of the bookstore, as Grandpa intended. 3. Frank will return as much of the money as he can immediately. For the rest, we'll set up a repayment plan. 4. Frank has agreed to seek counseling for his gambling addiction and financial issues. 5. In exchange for his cooperation and commitment to making amends, I won't pursue criminal charges. We're meeting with the family this weekend to explain everything. I'm incredibly nervous, but also hopeful. Frank seems genuinely remorseful and committed to making things right. I know some of you will think I'm being too lenient, and maybe you're right. But I keep coming back to what Grandpa would want. He was always big on second chances and believed people could change. I want to honor that spirit, while still protecting myself and respecting his final wishes. I'll update again after the family meeting. Wish me luck, I have a feeling I'm going to need it. Edit 3. First of all, thank you all for your continued support and advice. It's been invaluable during this crazy time. The family meeting happened yesterday, and, well, it was intense. Frank and I sat everyone down and explained the whole situation. We showed them the real will, Frank's confession, and our proposed plan moving forward. To say they were shocked would be an understatement. There was a lot of yelling, crying, and accusations flying around. Aunt Sarah, Frank's ex-wife, was particularly upset, feeling that she'd been cheated out of potential support for their kids, my cousins. My cousins themselves seemed torn between anger at their dad and relief that the truth was finally out. It took hours, but we eventually managed to reach a tentative agreement. 1. We're going to follow Grandpa's real will as closely as possible. That means I get the bookstore and the larger share of the estate. 2. Frank has agreed to a more structured repayment plan, with oversight from a financial advisor. He's also going to sell his car and some other assets to pay back as much as he can upfront. 3. We're setting up a small trust for my cousin's education, taken from the part of the inheritance that would have gone to Frank. It's not a huge amount, but it's something. 4. Frank has agreed to enter a comprehensive treatment program for his gambling addiction, paid for by selling some of the assets he acquired with the stolen money. 5. We're all going to attend family counseling to work through this trauma and try to rebuild trust. It's not a perfect solution, and there's still a lot of hurt and anger to work through. But it feels like a step in the right direction. As for the bookstore, I'm excited but nervous about taking it over. I've been talking with the current manager, who's been running things since Grandpa retired, and she's agreed to stay on and help me learn the ropes. I have some ideas for modernizing a bit while still keeping the cozy, community-focused atmosphere that made it so special to Grandpa. I know we have a long road ahead of us as a family. Trust has been broken, and it won't be rebuilt overnight. But I keep thinking about something Grandpa used to say: the greatest test of a family isn't how they act when things are good, but how they come together when things fall apart. We're pretty broken right now, but we're trying to come together. I think Grandpa would be proud of that. I'll update again if there are any major developments, but for now, I want to focus on healing, learning to run the bookstore, and honoring Grandpa's memory. Thank you all again for your support, advice, and for listening to this crazy story. It's meant more than you know. Final edit. It's been about 6 months since my last update, and I wanted to give you all one final post to close out this chapter of my life. First, the bookstore is doing well. It took some time to find my footing, but with the help of our amazing staff and some gentle modernization, we now have a cozy coffee corner and host local author events. We're not just staying afloat but actually growing. Every day I walk in, I feel Grandpa's presence and know he'd be proud. As for the family situation, Frank has stuck to his word. He's been consistently attending therapy and Gamblers Anonymous meetings. He's about 40% through his repayment plan, having sold off a lot of his unnecessary possessions and taken on a steady job for the first time in years. It's not always easy for him, but I can see he's genuinely trying to turn his life around. The family counseling has been challenging, but productive. There are still moments of tension and old hurts that resurface, but we're learning to communicate better and support each other. My cousins, in particular, have shown incredible maturity through all of this. The education trust we set up for them has eased some of the financial strain, and they're starting to rebuild their relationship with Frank. Aunt Sarah has come around somewhat. While she and Frank will never fully reconcile, they're at least able to be civil for the sake of the kids. She's even started volunteering at the bookstore's children's reading hour, which has been great for the community. As for me, I'm doing better than I ever expected. Running the bookstore has given me a sense of purpose and connection to Grandpa that I thought I'd lost. I've been dating someone wonderful who's been incredibly supportive through all of this family drama. And most importantly, I feel like I'm honoring Grandpa's legacy, not just through the store, but by trying to keep the family together and give second chances. There are still tough days. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice in handling things the way I did. But then I'll have a moment, like when a kid's face lights up during story time, or when I find a rare book that I know Grandpa would have loved, and I feel at peace with my decisions. One of the most unexpected outcomes of this whole ordeal has been the closer relationship I've developed with my cousins. They're a bit younger than me, the oldest is just starting college, and we were never super close growing up. But going through this together has brought us closer. They often hang out at the bookstore after school, and we've started a tradition of Sunday family dinners. It's bittersweet, knowing that it took this crisis to bring us together, but I'm grateful for the silver lining. The repayment plan with Frank has had its ups and downs. There have been a couple of times when he's fallen behind, and I'd be lying if I said it didn't make me nervous. But each time, he's come to me proactively, explained the situation, and we've worked out a solution. The financial advisor we brought in has been invaluable in helping us navigate these bumps in the road. One particularly touching moment came about 4 months after my last update. Frank asked if he could start volunteering at the bookstore on weekends. At first, I was hesitant. The store had become my sanctuary, and I wasn't sure how I felt about him being there. But I decided to give it a try, and I'm glad I did. Seeing him connect with customers, carefully handling the books Grandpa loved so much, and really throwing himself into learning the business. It's been healing for both of us. There was a day, not too long ago, when we were closing up the shop together. Frank paused while shelving some books and turned to me with tears in his eyes. "You know," he said, "I never really understood why Dad loved this place so much. But working here, seeing how it brings people together. I get it now. And I'm so sorry I ever thought about selling it." That moment meant more to me than any repayment could. Of course, it hasn't all been smooth sailing. There have been arguments, moments of doubt, and times when the weight of everything feels overwhelming. The family counseling sessions can still be intense, dredging up old hurts and resentments that go beyond just the inheritance issue. But we keep showing up, keep trying, and that counts for something. One of the hardest parts has been dealing with the wider community. Word got out about what happened, it was inevitable in a small town, and people have had opinions. Some have been incredibly supportive, praising us for how we handled things and for keeping the bookstore going. Others have been judgmental, saying I was too easy on Frank or that airing our dirty laundry has somehow tarnished Grandpa's memory. I've had to develop a thicker skin and learn when to engage and when to just let things go. The bookstore has become a bit of a haven in that respect. When I'm there, surrounded by the smell of old books and the quiet hum of readers, none of the outside noise matters. There have been some practical challenges too. Taking over the bookstore meant putting my previous career on hold, which was a bigger adjustment than I expected. I've had to learn a lot about business management, taxes, and all the behind-the-scenes work that goes into running a shop. There have been late nights poring over spreadsheets, stressful meetings with accountants, and moments when I questioned if I was really cut out for this. But then there are the rewards. Like the time a regular customer came in, an elderly woman who'd been coming to the store since Grandpa first opened it. She took my hand and said, "Your grandfather would be so proud. This place feels just like it always has, full of love and stories." I cried right there in the middle of the shop. Or the day I discovered a box of old journals in the back room, filled with Grandpa's thoughts on books, customers, and life in general. Reading through them has been like having conversations with him again, and they've given me new insights into how to run the store. We've started some new traditions at the bookstore that I think Grandpa would have loved. Once a month, we have a blind date with a book event, where we wrap books in brown paper with just a few intriguing words written on the outside. It's been a hit, especially with younger readers looking to break out of their comfort zones. We've also partnered with the local school to start a literacy program for underprivileged kids. Every week, a group comes to the store for reading sessions and to pick out a book to take home. Seeing their excitement about reading reminds me why this place is so important. As for my personal life, things are going well with my partner. They've been incredibly patient and supportive through all of this, even on the days when I'm stressed and distracted. We're talking about moving in together soon, which is both exciting and a little scary. Part of me feels guilty for focusing on my own happiness with everything else going on, but I'm trying to remember that Grandpa would want me to live my life fully. Frank's journey has been inspiring to watch. He's had setbacks. There was a particularly rough patch around the holidays when the temptation to gamble became almost overwhelming for him. But he reached out for help, leaning on his support system and doubling down on his therapy sessions. Seeing him fight so hard to change has softened a lot of the anger I initially felt towards him. One unexpected outcome of all this has been a renewed interest in our family history. Going through Grandpa's things at the bookstore sparked a curiosity about our roots. I've started researching our family tree and have uncovered some fascinating stories. It's become a shared project for the whole family, giving us something positive to focus on together. There was one discovery that hit particularly hard. I found an old letter from my dad to Grandpa, written just a few months before Dad passed away. In it, he expressed concerns about Frank's behavior and asked Grandpa to look out for me. Reading it was like a punch to the gut, bringing up grief I thought I'd dealt with long ago. But it also reinforced that I'm on the right path, honoring both Dad's and Grandpa's wishes by keeping the family together and running the bookstore. As we approach the 1-year mark of finding Grandpa's real will, I've been doing a lot of reflecting. If you had told me a year ago that this is where we'd end up, I wouldn't have believed you. There have been moments of profound sadness, burning anger, and overwhelming anxiety. But there have also been moments of joy, reconnection, and growth that I never expected. I've learned more about forgiveness, both giving it and receiving it, than I ever thought possible. I've discovered strengths in myself that I didn't know I had. And I've gained a deeper appreciation for the complexities of family relationships and the power of second chances. Do I still have moments of doubt? Absolutely. There are nights when I lie awake wondering if I've been too forgiving, if I've somehow let Grandpa down by not taking a harder line. But then I'll remember the way his eyes would crinkle when he smiled, the gentleness with which he'd handle his favorite books, and the countless times he spoke about the importance of family. And I know, deep in my heart, that he would approve of how we've handled things. Looking ahead, I'm cautiously optimistic. The bookstore is doing well, and we're even talking about possibly expanding to include a small cafe next door. Frank is about halfway through his repayment plan and hasn't missed a payment in months. Our family dinners have become a true highlight of my week, filled with laughter and only the occasional awkward moment. I know we still have a long way to go. Trust, once broken, takes a long time to fully repair. There will likely be more bumps in the road ahead. But I'm proud of how far we've come and hopeful about where we're going. To everyone who's followed this crazy journey and offered advice and support along the way, thank you. Your perspectives have been invaluable, and knowing that others have gone through similar situations has been incredibly comforting. If there's one lesson I've learned through all of this, it's that life rarely goes according to plan. Sometimes the greatest tests of our character come when we least expect them. But it's in those moments, when everything seems to be falling apart, that we have the opportunity to build something even stronger. Grandpa's bookstore stands as a testament to that idea. It's more than just a place to buy books now. It's become a symbol of resilience, of family, and of the power of stories to bring people together. Every time I turn the key in the lock and smell that familiar scent of paper and possibility, I'm grateful for the chance to continue his legacy. So here's to second chances, to the family we're born with and the family we choose, and to the stories that shape us. And to Grandpa, I hope we're making you proud. Edit. Wow, I'm genuinely overwhelmed by the response to this final update. Your comments, messages, and awards mean so much to me. I've read every single one, even if I haven't had a chance to respond to them all. To address a few common questions/comments. 1. Yes, I'm considering writing a book about this experience. Several of you have mentioned that it would make a great memoir or even a novel. I'm not sure I'm up to that task, but I'm definitely thinking about it. Maybe I'll start with a blog about running a small-town bookstore and see where it goes from there. 2. For those asking about specific legal details, I'm not comfortable sharing more than I already have out of respect for my family's privacy. But I will say that we consulted with legal professionals every step of the way to ensure we were handling things properly. 3. The suggestions for bookstore events and programs have been amazing. I'm making a list and will definitely be implementing some of your ideas. The Book Swap Meetup and local author showcase are at the top of my list. 4. To those who have shared similar stories of family conflict and reconciliation, thank you. Your vulnerability and strength are inspiring, and it helps to know we're not alone in navigating these complex situations. 5. And to those who think I've been too forgiving, I understand your perspective. It hasn't been an easy road, and there are still days when I struggle with my decisions. But for now, this path feels right for me and my family. I appreciate your concern and will remain vigilant moving forward. Thank you all again for being part of this journey with me. Your support has meant more than you know. Here's to new chapters, in books and in life.